So this is the Baruch Fleischman. This is the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. And we're reading some deep stuff. It's the Gaon of Vilna, the famous Gaon of Vilna, who is elevating this elevator right now, bringing us into the planets and the stars, giving us a view of the connection between the tribes, which are 12, working on developing the concept of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, how in fact they are vessels for transmitting the life of the light of Hashem as the world continues to turn. So remember that we're on a ball. The ball is turning towards what we call the east, which is where the sun comes up. Exactly how that we start analyzing all of that, it becomes very, very mystical, because we understand that the sun is also moving through the constellations, and everything really around us has been moving in circular patterns. So here we come, and we're coming to the end of this chapter, chapter 10. I'd like to finish it up now. Now, I would like to go on and show you a quote from the Raavad. It's another commentary, and he, that is the Raavad, was one of the early rabbis before the time of the YAAKOV, the Rizal. But nobody really knows which Raavad that is, because there's a lot of them, because it's not the famous Raavad. The famous Raavad is Rabbi Avraham ben David. So this is an acrostic of his name. And by the way, Raavad is the acronym for Rabbi Avraham ben David, Rabbi Avraham, the son of David. And there were many rabbis who had the name of Avraham, the son of David. I mean, these are Jewish names. So I am not really sure which one it is, which one it was. But we're sure that this is not the famous Raavad, because he wrote the commentary on the Mishnah Torah, which was written by the Rambam, the Maimonides, and argued with the Rambam a lot. So this is a different Raavad. I think it's pronounced Raavad. But in any case, the Raavad here wants to show you that there is another interesting thing here, which is that all these attributes that we talked about and how we divided these names up into 3, 7, and 12, that is the names of the letters, connected to different attributes of God. So how does it work? I think it's something really interesting. In any case, the Raavad is going to list the 12 verses which connect all those 12 senses and attributions to different attributes of God. Besides that, when you hear these things, you also have to think which planet they are connected to, which constellations, which months, and then you could really start understanding things. And the Raavad says as follows. So let's try to follow the Raavad. Here we go. He says all these 12 characteristics are also attributed to the actions of God. Like it is said about the sense of seeing, and God saw. So it's an action of God that he sees. And you always have to remember that when things like this are said, there's more to that. And it's always in a spiritual way. In other words, God doesn't have eyes, but he sees better than anyone else. When God is referred to as having eyes, it only means that he watches things. It's a metaphor. This is referring to the power in which he controls things. And it is said about the sense of hearing, and God heard. And it's said about the sense of smell, and God smelled, and the good smell of the offering. And it is said about the sense of speaking, and God spoke. It's also said that God spoke with Moshe, and that he spoke with all the righteous people. So if you were reading the Torah in English, whatever language you read it in, and you come across these things, that you really want to understand how, and in fact, did Hashem speak with Avraham, for example, or Moshe. And it said about the sense of eating or consumption, his tongue is like fire which consumes consuming fire. And it is also said, for the Lord your God is like a consuming fire. And it is said about the sense of intercourse, and I, kind of allusion for, had an intercourse or intercourses with you. And it is said about the sense of work or creation, all the actions of the great God. And it is said that about the sense of anger, and God became angry. And it is said about the sense of laughter, and Elohim, God laughed. And it is said about the sense of walking or motion, and Abraham walked with Hashem, with Elohim, Hashem. And so it is said about Noah, and it is said about the sense of sitting. The one God who sits in heaven shall laugh. And it is said about the sense of thought, God thought and considered the option of destroying it. And it is said about the sense of sleep, and wake up, or awaken thee. Why should you sleep, God? So you see, all of these 12 characteristics, all these 12 senses are being attributes of God himself. That goes back to the idea, but I like to add this phrase, they're actually a manifestation of godliness. And that goes back to the idea of us having 12 permutations of God's name. Now, how does that work? The name Havaya, for example. This is with each month having a different permutation of God's name. So it could Yud K Vav K, then it could Yud Vav K, K, Yud Vav, I would go Yud Vav K, K. There's lots to do. I don't have them in front of me. And each month God is going to act in a different way, as he has all these different attributes in him. In other words, the sense of attribution of speech is going to be the first one. And that's going to be working through the simple permutation of the letters of Yud, K, Vav, and then the final K. As we mentioned that in previous spheros, is that he really counts the first 3 and adds 1. Here on the order is the straight order, which is the permutation of the month of Nisan. That's going to go down to the tribe of Yehuda, the sense which is connected to speech. And then it will come down to the constellation of Aries. So you have the tie between all of these. So you have the month, which is Nisan, you have the tribe, which is Yehuda, and then you have the sense of Yehuda, which is speech. And then it will come down to the constellation of Aries. And so we see that the connection between all the different groups of things, which are divided into 12 each. And now the Raavad, is going to go on. And he's going to say what? He's going to say what I said just now, that you may find in the Torah, in the books of the prophets, and the other holy writings, that there is always one of these adjectives being used concerning one of the characteristics of Hashem, of God. And you should know that we have a tradition, and according to it, we need all of these characteristics. And this is according to the standard explanation from mouth to mouth. In other words, this is a tradition which the Kabbalists learned and taught from mouth to mouth. One Kabbalist taught it to his students, and the students to their students, and so on. And those attributions are just parables, so to speak, because in reality, we speak here about the sense, the cause of senses. What we're talking about, what? The cause of the senses. And God forbid we shouldn't really give him one of those attributes, which is just explained, his way in a way and others can understand. Now, I'm not sure what he just said again. Let me just try it again. And those attributions are just parables. That's the part I missed. They're really metaphors, so to speak, because in reality we speak here about the cause of causes, and God forbid we shouldn't really give him one of these attributes. In other words, that's why I use the word manifestation, because physicality is a manifestation of something which is not physical, which is Hashem. But he manifests himself in different forms of physicality. We just explained his ways in a way we and others can understand. So in any case, we went through the commentary of the Gaon of Vilna, and I thought it was very interesting to see what he has to say and shed some light on this topic. And we saw a little bit of the commentary of the Raavad on this topic too, and I think next week will be our next chapter, the final chapter in this big chapter, and I think next week we are going to go on and talk about the planets for a while. In other words, we've spent a number of weeks talking about the months and the signs, as well as the planets, as all of those topics are explained in Sefer Yetzirah. And now we're going to talk about the planets. And we would like to go to slowly get a picture of the way in which the Sefer Yetzirah looks at astrology, which is interesting. because you don't see a lot of the things we talked about in any other text on astrology. So the thing is very difficult. I think when I was learning with Rabbi Yaakov, he was constantly on the search for different kinds of places that talk in the Torah, because we know it's a basic fundamental part of Torah is the Jewish astrology, but it's hard to find. So he says again, but you don't see a lot of these things talked about in any other text on astrology where it gives these 12 senses. They don't talk about that, connecting each one of them with a different zodiac constellation. I really haven't seen this anywhere before, and we'll talk about it a little more in our next class. Well, this is Baruch Fleischman, and we've been listening to a series here. Next time we'll be back onto the conclusion of this, where he promises that he can get more into the planets, more what's going on in the zodiac. This is Baruch Fleischman. We're at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel.